Welcome to another deep dive. Today,
Yeah.
we're stepping back in time to the late 1960s, a period of, a lot of social change and,
Yeah.
unfortunately, the backdrop for one of the most infamous unsolved mysteries in American history, the Zodiac Killer.
Yeah, it's a case that's as fascinating as it is frightening. And we're going to unpack it all for you today. We've got firsthand accounts, we've got expert analysis, and of course, we've got those chilling ciphers that still puzzle investigators to this day.
Exactly. It's easy to get caught up in all the mythology surrounding the Zodiac, but
Right.
we're going to ground ourselves in the facts today. We'll explore the known victims, the killer's bizarre communication style, and the impact this case had on Northern California and really beyond.
And that's what's so gripping about this case, isn't it? It wasn't just about the brutality of the crimes. It was about the Zodiac's deliberate attempt to create this public persona, to turn himself into a terrifying spectacle.
He wanted to be a character, ripped from the pages of, like, a thriller novel, leaving his mark on history through this combination of violence and enigma.
He certainly succeeded in that regard, but
Yeah.
let's start at the beginning. It all began in the summer of 1969 in Vallejo, California, with the tragic murders of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, a seemingly random attack on a young couple parked on a lover's lane.
Such a tragic start to a string of horrifying events. And this is where we see the emergence of the Zodiac's signature cruelty, approaching the car, forcing the couple out, before shooting them at close range. Just a cold and calculated act that set the tone for the terror to come.
And then just a few months later, July of '69, the Zodiac struck again, this time targeting Darlene Ferrin and Mike Mageau in a parking lot, also in Vallejo. Thankfully, Mike survived the attack, and he provided crucial eyewitness testimony that helped to build a profile of the killer.
And that's where things take a truly disturbing turn, don't you think? Because it's after this attack that the Zodiac starts contacting the press, sending those infamous coded messages, the ciphers that he became so known for.
Absolutely. And it's the speed with which one of those ciphers, the 408 cipher, was solved, that makes this case even more intriguing. You have to wonder, was he overconfident? Or was he deliberately leading investigators down a false trail? Like, was this all a game to him? We may never know for sure.
It's chilling to think about. This wasn't just about murder. This was about control, manipulation, and a twisted desire to play with the fears of an entire community. And it was about to escalate even further.
You're right. And the escalation wasn't just in the crimes themselves, but in the audacity of his communications. Let's not forget that chilling Halloween card he sent to a journalist with the skeleton and the words, "Peekaboo, you are doomed."
A horrifying message that played directly into the growing sense of panic surrounding this case. It wasn't enough for him to commit these crimes. He needed to revel in the fear that he was creating, to make everyone feel like they were living in his macabre play.
And remember, he claimed to have killed 37 people, even though only 5 were ever definitively linked to him. That discrepancy raises so many questions. Was he exaggerating to inflate his notoriety? Were there more victims out there that we just haven't connected to him yet?
These are questions that continue to haunt investigators and armchair detectives alike. But if you're looking for a truly terrifying example of the Zodiac's methodical nature, we need to look at the attack at Lake Berryessa, September of 1969.
A chilling scene indeed. Imagine a beautiful sunny day at the lake, a young couple enjoying a picnic. That's where the Zodiac, wearing a hooded executioner outfit, approached Cecilia Shepard and Brian Hartnell. This wasn't just about hiding his identity. It was about creating this terrifying persona.
And he took his time, didn't he? He tied them up, methodically stabbed them, and left his signature symbol on their car door. Almost like a calling card. It sends chills down your spine to think about the terror they must have felt in those moments.
This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a carefully orchestrated act of violence, designed to send a message. And that message, unfortunately, was far from over, because the Zodiac's reign of terror was about to take an even more chilling turn with the murder of Paul Stine.
Let's talk about that. This attack differed from his previous ones in several key ways. Paul Stine was a cab driver in San Francisco, a random target in a bustling city, a far cry from the secluded lovers' lanes of his earlier crimes.
And the audacity of this murder was even more profound. Not only did the Zodiac shoot Stine in cold blood, but he then took a piece of Stine's bloody shirt and mailed it to the San Francisco Chronicle, adding another layer of horror to the case. It shows an escalation in his desire for attention, a need to prove his dominance over the city and its authorities.
And what's even more frustrating is that the police almost caught him that night. They received a description of the suspect from witnesses, and they even encountered a man matching that description, walking away from the scene.
But here's where it gets really heartbreaking. Due to a miscommunication, the officers were actually looking for a black suspect. They let the man go, unknowingly missing their chance to apprehend the Zodiac Killer.
A near miss that haunts the case to this day. The Zodiac, it seemed, had once again slipped through the cracks, leaving behind a trail of terror and unanswered questions.
Yeah.
So, you've got to be wondering, who was this man behind the mask? Who was the Zodiac Killer?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Over the years, there have been countless suspects, some more promising than others. Arthur Lee Allen, for example. He seemed like a strong contender for a while.
He did. He owned a Zodiac watch. He had handwriting that resembled the killer's and just had this unsettling aura about him. There was a lot of circumstantial evidence pointing in his direction.
And this is a big but. The DNA evidence didn't match. So despite the compelling circumstantial evidence, Allen was eventually ruled out.
Which brings us to another intriguing suspect, Ross Sullivan.
Sullivan worked at a library near one of the murders, bore a resemblance to the Zodiac sketch, and had a documented history of mental illness. He even became more reclusive and paranoid as time went on, further fueling speculation.
He seemed to tick a lot of the boxes, didn't he? But, as with Allen, the lack of conclusive proof remains a frustrating obstacle in this case.
And of course, we can't forget the recent claims made by the case breakers in 2021, who believed that a man named Gary Post was the Zodiac.
Right. They generated a lot of buzz with their theory, presenting photographic evidence, and even claiming to have decoded another one of the Zodiac ciphers.
Here's where critical thinking comes into play. While their theory certainly caught the public's attention, the evidence they presented has been met with a lot of skepticism. Law enforcement hasn't bought into it, and many experts believe their decoded message is a stretch at best.
It seems like every time we get close to an answer, the trail goes cold. But that's part of what makes this case so captivating, isn't it? The Zodiac was a master manipulator, a phantom who seemed to vanish into thin air, leaving behind a legacy of fear and mystery.
Absolutely. And that brings us to one of the most perplexing questions of all. Why did the killings suddenly stop?
Yeah, that's a good question. One day he was terrorizing California, sending taunting letters to the press. The next, silence.
It's a question that has spawned countless theories. Did he die? Was he in prison for another crime? Or did he simply decide to retire from his life of terror?
It's a chilling thought, isn't it? The idea that he could have just walked away, blended back into society, his dark secret hidden behind a mask of normalcy.
And here's where it gets even more unsettling. Some people believe he could still be alive, watching all of this unfold from the shadows, aware of the ongoing fascination with his case.
Talk about a creepy thought. The Zodiac. A ghost from the past, still lurking in the present. It's a possibility that adds another layer of intrigue to this already complex and disturbing case. But before we get too caught up in speculation, let's take a step back and talk about the victims.
You're right. It's important to remember that behind all the mystery and intrigue, there were real people whose lives were tragically cut short. David Faraday, Betty Lou Jensen, Darlene Ferrin, Cecilia Shepard, Paul Stein, their story should never be forgotten.
Absolutely. And we'll delve deeper into their stories in just a bit. But first, I think it's time to explore another fascinating aspect of this case, the ciphers.
Let's do it. The ciphers offer this unique window into the Zodiac's mind, a glimpse into his thought processes and motivations. And who knows, maybe, just maybe, they hold the key to finally unmasking this enigmatic killer.
Okay, so we've talked about the victims and some of the key suspects in the Zodiac case. But you're probably wondering about those cryptic messages he sent, those ciphers that have puzzled investigators for decades. What can we learn from them?
The ciphers are absolutely fascinating. They offer like a glimpse into the Zodiac's mind, showcasing his intelligence, his desire for control, and this like twisted sense of humor. There's a chilling arrogance in the way he challenged the public to decode these messages, almost as if he was daring us to understand his darkness.
He definitely seemed to enjoy the cat and mouse game he was playing with law enforcement and the media. But here's something I find interesting. Out of the 4 ciphers the Zodiac sent, only one, the 408 cipher, was definitively solved. It contained a rambling message boasting about his crimes and his desire to collect slaves in the afterlife. Pretty disturbing stuff.
It is. And the quick resolution of that particular cipher has led some experts to speculate that it was a deliberate red herring. Perhaps he wanted to feed the police false information or, throw them off a scent entirely.
That's a fascinating theory. It adds another layer of complexity to an already complicated case. But let's talk about the ciphers that remain unsolved. The 340 cipher, for example, has baffled cryptographers for over 50 years. what are some of the challenges in cracking these codes?
Well, for starters, we're dealing with a relatively small amount of text. The 340 cipher, as its name suggests, consists of only 340 characters. That limited amount of data makes it incredibly difficult to identify patterns or apply traditional code-breaking techniques.
So it's like trying to solve a puzzle with only a handful of pieces.
Exactly. And to complicate matters further, we don't even know for sure what language or languages he might have used. There's speculation that he incorporated symbols and codes from various sources, making it even harder to crack.
It's like he wanted to create a puzzle that was practically unsolvable. But there have been some recent developments, haven't there? Didn't a team of amateur codebreakers claim to have solved the 340 cipher back in 2020?
Yes, they did. Their solution generated a lot of excitement, and it seemed to offer a tantalizing glimpse into the Zodiac's identity. The decoded message mentioned a specific television show and a local radio personality, sparking speculation that these could be clues to his true identity.
But the FBI wasn't convinced, were they?
Not entirely. They acknowledged the efforts of the codebreakers, but ultimately stated that the solution wasn't conclusive. And many experts have raised doubts about the methodology used to decipher the message.
So, yet again, we find ourselves at a crossroads in this case. We have this tantalizing piece of the puzzle, but we're not quite sure if it fits. It's a frustrating reminder of how elusive the truth can be in this case.
It is, and it speaks to the enduring power of the Zodiac's legacy. He's managed to create a puzzle that continues to challenge us, to make us question what we know and how we interpret information.
And we can't forget that chilling possibility that he deliberately crafted these ciphers to be unsolvable, to taunt us from beyond the grave, so to speak.
A haunting thought indeed. But let's shift gears for a moment and consider the cultural impact of the Zodiac case. It's been the subject of countless books, movies, documentaries, even a few operas. Why do you think this story continues to captivate us, even after all these years?
Well, I think it's a combination of factors. First, there's the mystery itself. The Zodiac was never caught, and his identity remains a source of endless speculation. We humans are naturally drawn to puzzles, right? And this one is as perplexing as it gets. We want to know who he was, why he did what he did, and how he managed to evade capture for so long.
And I think there's also a fascination with the era itself. The late 1960s were a time of immense social and political upheaval. The Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, the rise of counterculture. These events created a sense of anxiety and uncertainty, a feeling that the world was changing in unpredictable ways.
Right. It was a time when people were questioning authority, challenging traditional norms, and grappling with this sense of disillusionment. And into this chaotic landscape steps the Zodiac, a figure who embodies the era's darker impulses, the violence, the paranoia, the sense that anything could happen.
Exactly. He becomes a symbol of the fear and instability of the time, like a boogeyman lurking in the shadows, threatening to disrupt the fragile order of society.
And the fact that he targeted young couples, symbols of innocence and hope, only heightened the sense of terror. He wasn't just attacking individuals. He was attacking the very fabric of American society.
And let's not forget the role of the media in amplifying the fear. The newspapers were filled with stories about the Zodiac, his cryptic messages, and the ongoing manhunt. It created a sense of collective anxiety, a feeling that no one was safe.
It was like a real-life horror movie unfolding in real time, and everyone was glued to the screen, desperate for answers, but also secretly terrified of what those answers might reveal.
And that's the genius of the Zodiac's plan, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He understood the power of the media, and he used it to his advantage. He became a media sensation, a household name, a figure of both terror and morbid fascination.
And that fascination continues to this day. It's amazing to me how much the Zodiac case has permeated popular culture. We see references to him in movies, TV shows, books, even video games. He's become like a cultural icon, a symbol of unsolved mystery and the dark side of the American psyche.
It's a fascinating phenomenon, and it speaks to the enduring power of the Zodiac story. He's become a modern-day myth, a cautionary tale about the monsters that lurk in the shadows, the mysteries that may never be solved, and the terror that can linger long after the crimes have been committed.
To all the fascination and the speculation, it's important to remember the human cost of this case. The victims and their families deserve justice and closure. And that's why, even after all these years, people continue to investigate, to search for answers, and to hope that one day the Zodiac's true identity will be revealed.
You're absolutely right. And with the advancements in DNA technology and forensic science, there's always hope that new evidence will come to light, finally shedding light on this dark chapter in American history.
Well, you've definitely given us a lot to think about. The ciphers, the media frenzy, the cultural impact, it's all connected in a way that makes this case even more fascinating, perplexing. But before we wrap things up, there's one last question I want to pose to you. Do you think we would be as captivated by this story if the Zodiac's identity had been revealed early on? Would knowing the man behind the mask somehow diminish the mystery, the fear, the enduring allure of this case?
That's a great question, and it's one that I think about often. On one hand, knowing the Zodiac's identity would provide a sense of closure, of finally putting a face to the name that has haunted us for decades. We could perhaps understand his motives, his background, the events that led him down this dark path that might even help bring some peace to the families of the victims, knowing that the person responsible for their pain had been identified and brought to justice.
But on the other hand, wouldn't it also strip away some of the mystery, the intrigue, the very essence of what makes this case so captivating? The Zodiac, in many ways, has become a blank slate onto which we project our fears, our fascination with the macabre, our desire to make sense of the senseless.
Precisely. He's become this larger-than-life figure, an enigma that allows us to explore the darker corners of human nature without having to confront the reality of a specific individual. Knowing his identity might humanize him, make him less monstrous, and in doing so, diminish the power he holds over our collective imagination.
So are we better off not knowing? Is the mystery, the ambiguity, essential to the Zodiac's enduring legacy?
Perhaps. It's a question with no easy answers, but I think it's worth considering, and it's something I hope you'll continue to ponder long after this deep dive is over.
I know I will, and I encourage all of you listening to do the same, because the Zodiac case is more than just a true crime story. It's a reflection of our culture, our fears, and our enduring fascination with the unknown.
It's hard to say for sure. I think there's a certain fascination with the unknown, this idea that someone could commit such heinous acts and simply vanish without a trace.
Right, like a ghost story come to life.
Yeah.
He becomes this symbol of our deepest fears, the idea that evil can lurk anywhere, even in the seemingly ordinary.
And that fear is only amplified by the fact that his crimes remain unsolved. It creates this sense of unease, a feeling that we're not as safe as we think we are.
It's a reminder that even in an age of advanced technology and seemingly limitless information, there are still mysteries that may never be fully explained. And perhaps that's okay. Maybe there's a certain beauty in the unknown, a reminder that life isn't always black and white, that there are these shades of gray that we may never fully comprehend.
I think you've hit on something important there. There's a tendency, especially in true crime, to want to tie everything up neatly, to find a clear-cut solution, a satisfying resolution. But sometimes the truth is messy, complex, and ultimately elusive.
And maybe that's what makes the Zodiac case so enduring. It challenges our desire for order, for closure, for a definitive answer. It forces us to confront the limitations of our knowledge and the enduring power of the unknown.
And it invites us to engage in the process of inquiry, to ask questions, to explore different perspectives, to grapple with the ambiguity of it all. In a way, the Zodiac case is like a mirror, reflecting back at us our own curiosity, our desire to understand the world around us, and our fascination with the darker aspects of human nature.
And that's what makes this deep dive so rewarding, don't you think? It's not just about rehashing the facts of the case. It's about exploring these larger themes, the questions that linger long after the details have faded from memory. It's about grappling with the nature of evil, the allure of mystery, and the enduring power of storytelling.
Exactly. And as we wrap up our deep dive into the Zodiac Killer, I'd like to leave you with a final thought. We've discussed the ciphers, the suspects, the victims, and the cultural impact of this case. But perhaps the most important takeaway is this. The Zodiac case is a story that's still being written. New theories emerge, old evidence is re-examined, and the quest for answers continues.
And who knows? Maybe someday, through the dedication of investigators, advancements in technology, or even just a stroke of luck, the Zodiac's true identity will be revealed. Until then, the mystery endures, captivating our imaginations, and reminding us that some stories are destined to remain unfinished, their secrets locked away in the shadows of history.
And that, I believe, is part of the enduring appeal of the Zodiac Killer. He's a blank canvas onto which we project our fears, our fascination with the macabre, and our enduring desire to solve the unsolvable.
So, what stands out to you in all of this? What will you be thinking about long after this deep dive is over? Will you be drawn to those unsolved ciphers, pondering the motivations of a killer lost to time? Or will you find yourself reflecting on the victims, their lives cut short by a shadow that still looms large in our collective memory, whatever it may be? I encourage you to keep those minds curious and those questions coming. Until next time, keep exploring the depths of knowledge. And remember, even in the darkest corners, there's always something fascinating to be discovered.